Never say I'm busy again. Hi, I'm Mike Mason. This is the Mortal Kombat Podcast. The Mortal Kombat Podcast is a podcast arm of Very Christie. Very Christie is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help men attain the full stature of Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at verychristie.com or stjosephsociety.org. All right, gentlemen, happy Friday to you all. I'm sure you're happy to get to the end of your work week, and definitely these warmer, more sunny days are really, really awesome. I hope you guys are also enjoying this fantastic Easter season. Remember, Easter is a season, so we are still to be full of festivity at the resurrection of our Lord. And so I hope you guys are doing that. All right. What I'd like to talk about this week, I would like to get into the phrase, I'm busy. When you ask people how they've been, most people will say, I'm busy. I myself, when people ask me how I've been, would generally respond, I'm busy. And the reason why I would say I'm busy is because, well, I have a wife and 5 kids. I have a full-time job teaching high school. I'm a football coach. I work on this apostolate, Very Christie and St. Joe Society, because I'm an adjunct professor of philosophy at a local university, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when I say I'm busy, in some sense, it was a badge of honor. I'm sure many of you, when people ask you how you're doing, you say you're busy. Well, what I'd like to share with you this week and next week is I have tried to discipline myself to stop saying I'm busy. Because though I used to think that it was a badge of honor, I read a short book recently that convinced me that it's not. Now, I always had kind of suspicions that it wasn't necessarily a badge of honor, but this author helped me to kind of put the pieces together and kind of realize, like, no, I'm not busy. There's a different answer for that question, which we will get to later. But before I launch into this, one thing I want to encourage you guys with, one of the great things about this apostolate and working on this apostolate and doing these Friday podcasts is generally I pick things that I need to work on, okay, to various degrees. And so when I kind of pass on some of my thoughts to you guys or some of my encouragement to you, I've always wanted this podcast to be a podcast of solutions. There are lots of places on YouTube and Spotify and places to bemoan the problems of the world. That is not what I want to be about. What I want to be about is solutions. I think the solutions are right in front of us. I think the solutions are behind us in the sense that they're in the rich history of our Catholic faith. If we just dig down deep into it, and that I am very optimistic for our church and for our future, though I think we have a lot of work to do ahead. But I want to be solutions. So when I offer this sort of stuff, guys, a lot of the stuff is just stuff I'm thinking about, trying to work at, and things like that. So what I want to talk about this week, and I think next week as well, probably a kind of a two-parter, is on the concept of being too busy. I want you guys after the next 2 weeks to never say I'm busy again. Okay. Now, the book that I read, very short book by an author by the name of Conor Gallagher, this one right here for you. The title of the book is You Are Never Too Busy, Seeing Your Time the Way God Sees It. Now, Conor Gallagher is the president of Tan Books. He's president of a couple companies. Pretty impressive guy, good writer. I've read a couple of his books. One I read, If Aristotle's Kid Had an iPod. I read that a long time ago. That was a great book. So just, he's a sharp guy, hard worker. He has like 28 children or something. It's not 28, but I think it's like 17. Okay. He has a big old family. There's a picture of him in the book, and I didn't count it up before I turned this on. But one book I've picked up recently is You Are Never Too Busy. Now, I would encourage you guys to get your hands on this. I'm going to talk about some of the things that stood out to me in it. I'm not going to exhaust what he wrote in it. Just I'm going to point out a couple of things, give you guys my thoughts and encouragement on it. Buying the book would be worthwhile because he has a great way of explaining things, and I'm going to leave a lot of stuff out that'd be worth your time getting into. The other reason, I'm a big time reader, as you guys can imagine. Seeing the books behind me, I actually read those books, and I have a lot more than what you can see on camera. But I love short books, and his book is very short. I mean, look at that guy. I actually read it in one sitting, and then after reading it, called my wife over and talked to her about it for a long time. So I want to pass this on to you. So I'm just going to talk about a couple things that stood out to me in chapters 1 and 2. And then next week, we'll talk about a couple things that stood out in chapters 3 and 4. And then in 2 glorious weeks, as you guys go into Memorial Day, God willing, you will never say the phrase, I am too busy or I'm busy ever again. All right, Here's what I want to start with. Read a quote from him on page 3. He talks about bragging about being busy is a thing of the past. All right. Here's his quote. This is Conor Gallagher. Being busy might not be what you think it is. It really means that you are, in a manner of speaking, lost or out of control. It means the world has more power over you than God does. It means others have enslaved you. It might mean that you're not minding your own business. You might not want to tell everyone from here on just how busy you are. It is not a point worth bragging about. It is, in fact, the opposite, which we shall see shortly. All right. I don't think it's worth bragging about. I think he's correct about this. Okay. Now, just to head some things off, he's not advocating for laziness. Actually, the exact opposite. He's not advocating for idleness, if that means just sitting around watching the boob tube all the time. But he's going to attack the concept of being busy, and he is correct. Okay, in the first chapter, he tries to wrap his mind around what does it mean when we say we're busy, and he just goes through some standard definitions out of the dictionary that I'm going to pass on to you and give a couple thoughts to. One, he says, and this one he will admit sounds positive in the beginning, but by the end of the book, turns around and is negative. One, he says, being busy is to be occupied. Okay. Now, if you are occupied, that means you are engaged in action. So if I said, well, I'm busy right now because I'm recording a podcast. Okay. And so if anyone were to come in right now and said, what are you doing? I'd say, well, I'm busy because I'm occupied doing this task in front of me. That one seems positive. But remember, guys, and I don't think he said this, but occupied is also the term that we have when you turn the knob on the lock of the bathroom. Okay, when I go to mass on Sunday, if the knob's turned in red, it says occupied. Okay, I don't think we need to be describing our lives as if we are a latrine. Okay, being occupied is not necessarily a good thing, because the obvious question is, what are we being occupied with? And if our lives are busy in the sense of our lives are being occupied, just like a latrine is occupied, that's not a good thing. Okay. And so even when we look at the first definition of being busy, what's implied in there is that we are filled up. Well, the inevitable question is, filled up with what? Okay. So that's a first massive problem. So when you guys say you're busy, just like I did, and you say, well, I'm busy. What's that mean? Well, I'm just occupied. All my time's occupied by things. Question is, what is it occupied with? That's a serious question. Second, he says, being busy can also mean bustling around. Okay. That you're constantly moving from thing to thing all the time. Now, again, you can say, well, I have to bustle because I have lots of tasks that I'm occupied with that I have to bounce between to and fro from. Okay. So that doesn't seem like it's negative. But, I was reflecting on this once. When I was a Protestant, okay, I did not like, at the end of my time as an evangelical Protestant, I didn't like being an evangelical, not one bit. And I didn't want to be at church. In fact, it came to the point that I just had to make myself go because I thought I had to. I did not like it. Now, this is not true for Holy Mass, thank goodness. But really, the point of it, I didn't see any point in going. Okay. And when I would go, I just didn't want to be there. Okay. And because I worked at the church and volunteered, what I found myself doing was occupying my time during the church services, doing things, bustling about, doing important work so that I didn't have to sit there. This is bad. Now, I could critique evangelicalism heavily. I'm no fan of that form of worship. Okay. So I can maybe give myself a little bit of a break. But being at church is a time to sit with God and try to commune with him. Okay. I was bustling about avoiding that communion. All right. This can happen when you're sitting in the adoration chapel. Are we bustling about so much that there's other things we should be doing or maybe not doing? And so our busyness is borderline sinful or maybe just flat out sinful. So if we mean by we're being busy that we're bustling about, that's not good, fellas. Okay. Third thing, are we meddling? That busyness can refer to meddling. Are we meddling in other people's business? Now, you guys might say, well, Mike, this is a man's podcast. We men don't meddle. Maybe. Okay. But here's how he defines it. To meddle is to interest oneself in what is not one's concern. Now, do men, as a standard rule, meddle in each other's business? Nah, socially, I would say no. We don't sit in the corner and, get all chatty about what so and so's doing with such and such time or whatever. However, sometimes our hobbies, okay, and I'm a sports guy, I love sports. Sometimes watching sports, investigating it, there are things we meddle ourselves and get ourselves involved in we don't need to know about. Okay. And, there's listeners to this podcast that are in high school. And one of the things I warn these guys, say, listen, if you guys like sports, you like following your favorite team, that's fine. I mean, that's an okay thing. How much time are we meddling in this? How much time are we spending in knowing this stuff? Do we have to know the batting averages of every single player? Now, again, I don't want to go to some ridiculous extreme. I think some of these hobbies and watching rooting on a sports team can be a perfectly healthy thing, but it can also turn into meddling if we're all honest. Okay. And so are we doing that? Are we busy with that stuff? Lastly, is our life full of, and he puts this, distracting details? That's not good. Okay. Are there details in our life that we could cut out to keep our eyes fixed on what life's really about? Guys, when we say we're busy, those 4 things are what involved in it. These are not good. Okay. At best, we could say 2 of them could be good depending on what you're doing. That's at best. Okay. But the idea that we're busy, we need to remove this from our lexicon. Guys, when we go around saying we're busy, what we're getting at is we're not doing the things we should be doing. And he's going to get this later, and I'll reserve this for next week's podcast. But men, there's a sin, he gets this in chapter 2, called the sin of sloth. That's a vice that we've talked about here before. But sloth, as St. Thomas Aquinas puts it, okay, is a sorrow over spiritual goods. Okay, a sorrow over spiritual goods. And he includes a quote on page 23 of the book where he says this: the slothful man is one who wears himself out with work, fitness, social activities, consumption of news, and downloading the newest productivity app. Guys, a slothful man, you guys would think, is like the lazy guy, right? Doesn't do anything. He's fat and sits on the couch and eats pork grinds and watches Netflix and stuff like that. That guy might be slothful. Those would be signs of it. The slothful man can also be very fit. He works out a bunch. He's a high achiever in the workplace. Why? Because when you're slothful, you have sorrow over spiritual goods, which means you're avoiding the true goods you should be pursuing for the sake of lower goods that you should not be pursuing. Okay. Now, let me be clear here, and then we'll sign off because I'm going a little longer and I wanted to diagnose the problem. Things like fitness. I like fitness. I work out regularly. Okay. Things like having a hobby. I had a whole podcast on why you guys should have hobbies. I think hobbies are good things. Okay. Gainful employment, right? Fulfilling your duties at your workplace. These are good things. Okay. So a lot of the things that we call busy, when we reflect upon them, are things that we can keep and hold on to. But we need to take a serious examination of our lives to say, are we occupying our time, engaging activities we should not, that God's not asking us to do? Are we bustling about instead of being serious about the true business of life, right? Growing in holiness. Are we meddling in ourselves in details at work or in sports or that we don't need to know? And is our life full of distracting details? Okay. Guys, if we are too busy to pray, if you are too busy to exercise moderately, if you're too busy to read and reflect, if you're too busy to go on a walk with your wife and talk to her, if you're too busy to play catch with your son in the backyard, if you're too busy to get to church on Sundays, if you're too busy to be visiting the Blessed Sacrament and saying your daily rosary, this is sinful busyness and we need to get rid of it. Okay. And so what I encourage you guys to do this week, just like I'm going to do, man, I'm with you all on this. Okay? I'm just passing on stuff I've been concerned in my own life. We need to be serious about the business of God. And we're going to talk next week on what that business is. And we might have to take a serious look at our lives and take an honest look at stuff that has to go. So I'll leave that with you guys this week. Think through your life, kind of do an examination of your daily schedule, your weekly schedule, right? Just like you would an examination of conscience. do this examination, think about this stuff seriously, pray about it, ask yourself about it. And then next week, let's talk about some conclusions and how all of this reflection fits into the rule of life that I wrote that we share together in the St. Joe Society in Very Christie. Because that rule of life is there to help you guys to never say, I'm busy again. God bless.